So just last week, we learned that the UCP have decided to let a significant piece of regulation lapse, the regulations around carding or street checks. So what is that? Well, that's the process by which a police officer can stop you on the street to ask you to answer questions and provide personal information, perhaps see your ID. Now, you might remember this was a big conversation a few years back. There was a group of community advocates here in Alberta. They got a hold of data that showed you were far more likely to be stopped if you were Black, Indigenous, or part of another racialized community. And in 2021, the UCP's then Minister of Justice, Casey Madhu, well, he brought in legislation to ban it.
I am proud to announce that Alberta's government is banning the police practice of carding immediately and creating new rules on the use of street checks, not talk, not virtual signaling, not sweet talk, but real solutions.
Now, clearly the minister was very proud of his bill, and fair enough. It was an important step forward. I mean, the data showed carding was a problem, and like the minister said, it needed to be addressed. Now, my colleagues and I, admittedly, we did take some issue with the bill. Frankly, we felt it didn't go far enough compared to laws that had been passed in places like Ontario that provide stronger accountability and protections for citizens. But hey, it was more than we'd had. And Minister Madhu and the UCP, well, they sure weren't shy about bragging about it, pointing to it as one of their signature efforts to address discrimination here in the province of Alberta. Now, unfortunately, they didn't do too much more after that. And now, 4 years later, under a new premier and a new minister, they're effectively gutting the little bit that they did. Let me explain. See, the ban on carding was done in two parts. Through Bill 63, the legislation which laid out the broad strokes of the ban, and an accompanying set of regulations that laid out the specific details. And when it comes to something like carding, the details matter. So what's in Bill 63? Well, the legislation basically, it lays out the conditions under which an officer can ask for and retain voluntary information from a member of the public. It says they can do that if it's part of crime prevention activities. If they're gathering information for the purpose of intelligence related to individuals that they know or reasonably suspect to be engaged in illegal activities. If they're inquiring into offenses that may have been or might be committed. If they're inquiring into suspicious activities that they think may lead to detecting illegal activities or another lawful law enforcement activity, so fairly broad. It says a police officer is prohibited from carding, but it doesn't define what that is. Instead, it defines what carding isn't. It says it's not carding if they're stopping someone based on a prohibited ground of discrimination, because they're looking for a specific person, and that prohibited ground is part of a credible, reasonably specific description of the person that they're looking for. And it says they can ask that person questions if they have specific details about an individual or situation that leads them to suspect that collecting that information from that individual they've stopped could be helpful. But it says they can't discriminate if you don't answer their questions, if you exercise your right to walk away, or they can't target you because you happen to be in a high crime location. That's it. That's all that's in the bill. Now, the regulation, it goes into a lot more detail. Regulation says that before an officer could start asking you questions, they had to tell you why they stopped you, that the conversation is voluntary, and that you don't have to answer questions, and that you have the right to walk away. It lays out the rules for minors. It says minors have to have the right to have a parent or guardian there with them, and they can't be questioned without one. It requires officers to take notes, lays out the specific information they need to include. It laid out protections for how any information that an officer collects gets stored, who can access it, and how it can be used. And it laid out requirements for training. It banned using the number of stops an officer makes as a measure of their performance. And it required police to do quarterly reviews, to publish an annual report, and to take the data from those reports and take action if they found that they were disproportionately impacting any particular group. And now all of that, those protections, those guardrails, that reporting, that accountability is gone because the UCP just decided to let it expire. They've effectively gutted the law, gutted the protections that were in place. And here's the thing. In the last year, the UCP have been doing all kinds of things that are frankly putting a target on the back of Indigenous, Black, and other racialized Albertans. This past summer, at every stop on the Premier's Alberta Next propaganda tour, they've been blaming immigrants to Alberta for the rising cost of housing, for wait times in hospitals and overcrowded classrooms, for our soaring rate of youth unemployment. They've brought in laws to make it harder to vote, based on conspiracies, and they're using that as an excuse to put your citizenship status on your driver's license. Basically, they're deliberately stoking anger and division for their own political gain while they make life harder and less safe for racialized Albertans. And now they're undermining the few protections against discrimination that this government had even bothered to put into place. Now let me be clear. This is not about attacking police. One of the best ways we can support police in doing the important work they do is to ensure we have clear, strong systems of accountability so they can maintain the trust of the public they're in place to serve. So that's why we, Alberta's New Democrats, are calling for that regulation on carding to be restored, to bring back the checks and balances, clear processes and procedures, and annual reporting to ensure that every Albertan's rights are protected. Because frankly, you deserve better, and better is possible.